Every child has a story. No matter who they are or where they live, they have dreams of doing big things. They have unique talents and they face obstacles. But some children face more obstacles than others, sometimes a lot more. Things like generational poverty, schools that are under-resourced, criminal justice, foster care, hunger, and even homelessness. Believe it or not, there's actually a number that can predict how many obstacles like these a child will face. This number is their zip code. Now, there isn't any one person to blame for this. It is a problem generated by 1,000 factors, and it continues one generation after another. This problem can seem overwhelming and too complicated to solve, but it isn't. Friends of the Children is a nonprofit organization that's been breaking the cycle of poverty one child at a time. We know that any child in any situation can succeed, even those facing the most obstacles. To that end, we provide a salaried professional mentor called a friend for each child who works with them from kindergarten to graduation, 12 and a half years, no matter what. These mentors work with each child every week on 9 core assets of personal strength, like growth mindset, problem solving, and self-management, all of which they will need to overcome the many obstacles in their path. It is a big investment to commit to a child for their entire childhood, but it's a model that's been working for over 25 years. While 60% of our children's parents have been impacted by the criminal justice system, 93% of our children avoid the criminal justice system. 50% of our parents didn't have the support necessary to graduate high school. 83% of Friends Youth celebrate graduation. 85% of our parents started parenting during their teen years. 98% of Friends Youth wait until after their teen years to become parents. Each dollar invested in a child returns $7 to the community. The Harvard Business School Association of Oregon estimates that helping one child through this program can save the United States around $900,000. But what these numbers don't capture is the immeasurable value of changing one single life. Children in our program become leaders in their community and successful in their careers, which has ripple effects to their siblings, peers, and neighbors, but also to their children, breaking the cycle of generational poverty. Friends of the Children is growing rapidly as communities across the country are experiencing the power of how one changes a child's story. One friend, one child, 12 and a half years, no matter what. Become a part of this story today.
Good evening. My name is Abhi Talwalkar. I am the co-founder and board chair of Friends of the Children here in the San Francisco Bay Area.
And I'm Michael Rugen, the executive director of Friends SF.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. The past year has been a challenge for all of us, but it's been especially challenging for the children and families we serve at Friends of the Children SF Bay Area. One of the things that distinguishes Friends of the Children is that we systematically select and enroll children who face the biggest barriers. And those barriers have gotten even bigger over the past year.
COVID has hit communities like Bayview Hunters Point much harder than most neighborhoods in San Francisco, medically, financially, and emotionally. And the turmoil around racial justice issues has only compounded the challenges for the families we serve, all of whom are people of color. You're going to hear a great discussion tonight, moderated by Priya David Clemens, host of KQED Newsroom. You'll hear from our 4 panel members who know the Bay Area community well. They'll tell you about daunting challenges our kids and our families are facing, and about the extraordinary work being done by the city and its nonprofit partners like Friends of the Children to support them. You know, Abhi, when COVID first struck last spring, we realized that we needed to expand our focus beyond individual children to address the most urgent needs of their entire families. So we surveyed our families and found that food insecurity was by far their #1 concern. Before we introduce you to our panel, we've got a short video that shows one of the ways that Friends of the Children pivoted to address that concern. Let's watch.
Okay. My name is Greg Kelly. I'm a professional mentor for Friends of the Children. I currently assist 8 kids on my roster in this area, Bayview Hunters Point district. I've been doing it for almost 2 years now. Totally love it. COVID has really been tough, rough, it's like, and I can see it like during our Zoom calls with some of my kids.
Every Saturday, I coordinate with the Noe Valley Farmers Market, and we pick up various different kinds of produce in bulk to be able to distribute to 24 different families every week. We try to get stuff that is familiar, not too hard to prepare, a lot of just ready-to-eat items, apples, oranges. Especially during COVID, a lot of food options have kind of not been available to families, especially in the Bayview. So we want to make sure we're doing the best we can to help support our families in any way we can.
I do this every Saturday where I drop off fresh produce, and sometimes we have gifts and books just to keep some kind of facial contact. All right, it's good seeing you, my man.
A lot of the families have transportation barriers where they don't have cars, or the buses take 3 hours to get from point A to point B. And especially during COVID, families aren't wanting to venture out. So we just want to help bridge that gap a little bit more, help them get access to these awesome, healthy choices.
It was such a calling for me to be able to give back in this capacity because I grew up in this community. I was really one of these kids. I was faced with so much adversity. So it's important that we just go in unbiased, non-judgmental, and we want to reach one, teach one, and give everyone the opportunity to succeed. And I believe every kid is capable of that, no matter what their demographic setting is.
I want to thank our partners at Noe Valley Farmers Market. They've actually been setting up a table every Saturday and raising money to help pay for those food deliveries. Those deliveries are not only addressing our families' concerns about putting food on the table, but they're also deepening the relationships between mentors like Greg and their children's caregivers. By focusing on the needs of the entire family, we're proving that we really mean it when we say we'll walk beside each child for 12 and a half years, no matter what.
We can't honor that 12-and-a-half-year commitment, Michael, or pay the salaries of professional mentors like Greg without the support of our generous donors. Right now, we're in the middle of our 2021 fundraising campaign, and our goal is to raise $1.5 million. We've raised nearly $1 million thus far, so we need to raise another $500,000 to reach our campaign goal. Several generous donors have supported us and offered to match every additional dollar you donate until we reach that $1.5 million goal. We realize that charitable giving is a personal decision. Those of you who are new to Friends of the Children may not be ready to donate, and that's perfectly fine. We hope you enjoy this town hall and learn more about our children, our families, and our program. For those of you who are ready to help us support our children and families, you can click on the donate button at the top right corner of your screen at any time during this program. You can send also a text message to 71777 with a message that says, Friends, that's FR, the number 1, ENDS, the dollar amount you want to donate, and your name. Now remember, every dollar you give tonight will result in $2 of support for the children we serve. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our moderator, KQED newsroom host, Priya David Clemens.
Thank you. Hello, and it's a pleasure to be here. This past year has been challenging for most of us, but you've heard the saying, same storm, different boats. Over the past year, the COVID pandemic and repeated instances of police violence have especially impacted people of color and those in underserved communities like Bayview Hunters Point the most. And of all of those who have been impacted, perhaps it's the children who have suffered most greatly. We're here today with 4 people who work closely with children and families in the Bayview, and we're going to ask them to tell us how the traumatic events of the past year have affected the children who live there and what the city and its nonprofit partners, like Friends of the Children, are doing to support those children and their families. Our first panelist is Dr. Maria Sue. Dr. Sue is the Executive Director of the San Francisco Department of Children, Youth, and Their Families, DCYF. DCYF is an innovative policy and grant-making agency and a proud steward of the Children and Youth Fund, a landmark initiative that funds comprehensive services for children, youth, and families in the city and county of San Francisco. Welcome, Dr. Sue. Next, after completing her graduate degree in social welfare at University of California, Berkeley, this panelist worked with multiple youth programs before joining the San Francisco Unified School District. As the school community coordinator and the school social worker at Hillcrest Elementary School in the Bayview, one of the Friends of the Children partner schools, she's worked with our mentors and children since 2017. Please welcome Gabrielle Theobald Anderson. Hello, Gabrielle.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Our next panelist has over 20 years of social service experience. Please welcome Director of Programs, Friends of the Children, SF Bay Area, Frederique Clermont. And our final panelist assumed the top leadership position at Young Community Developers, YCD, a community-based service provider of education, training, and employment placement services to residents of underserved communities throughout San Francisco in 2019. In addition, he currently serves on the San Francisco Police Commission and on the Friends of the Children SF Board. Please welcome Dion J. Brookter.
Hi, thank you so much, Priya. Happy to be here.
Thanks for being here. Thank you, all of you, for being here and for the work that you do day in and day out. Maria, let's start with you. What do you believe has been the single most difficult problem faced by children and their families in the Bayview over the past year, and what has your organization done to address that problem?
Thank you, Priya. And before I start, I just want to say thank you to Friends of the Children and just the phenomenal work that you do to support children throughout our city, but particularly children in the Bayview. And it's your commitment that really makes the system for child care providers and children providers work. So thank you. In terms of what's happened this past year, COVID has been terrible. This has truly been a year of loss for our children, for their families, for our community. And it has really shown the devastation on our highest need children and families, our families who are marginalized, our families who have been disconnected from support systems. And it is crucial for us within the city government as city officials to really recognize where we have failed and where we need to step up and step in and really provide that support, the coordination supports, the safety net supports, and to ensure that our children have access to key essentials that they and their families have a right to. I know that we'll speak later about just the education impact for our children, but from our perspective over at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, the education impact is just one aspect of the trauma that our children are experiencing. There's also the social emotional aspects as well. And combined together, you really have what we're seeing as the COVID avalanche for our children and families. Where this pandemic has really taken out a lot of our families, and we need to come together and support our families to get back on track and recover.
Thank you, Maria. Gabrielle, could you tell us from your perspective as someone who works so closely with children in a school, what has been your experience over this past year as the biggest problem that you've encountered?
Thank you so much for having me. First of all, I really deeply believe in Friends of the Children, which is why I'm here. We've partnered with them for many years, and I've seen the positive impacts that they can bring. Unfortunately, this year has been brutal. You know, obviously, we know the impacts of systemic racism and generations of redlining and gentrification in San Francisco have really significant large impacts on the families that we serve at Hillcrest, but that's only been heightened by COVID. In my role, I'm going to speak about some of the more recent changes we've seen this year. And I think one of the biggest challenges has been this already painful housing situation that we have in San Francisco. We've seen that really intensify. many of our families work in the restaurant industry or in the gig economy, and those are both sectors that have just been devastated by COVID, right? And it's resulted in really rapidly increasing rates of housing instability that we've seen at Hillcrest. And even with the amazing eviction moratorium, many of our families are in informal lease agreements. So taking advantage of the rental moratorium or the eviction moratorium has been challenging and complicated. And currently 40% of our families are classified as homeless under the definition in San Francisco, which is a lot of students. You know, we have 420 students, so that's over 200 kiddos and their families. And that's been really difficult because we just don't have the resources as a school to address the problem, unlike some of the other challenges that we've seen come up around academic engagement and food scarcity. And we've really been increasingly working to try and aid our families in navigating these really complicated and sparse rental relief and financial assistance programs, you know, with frankly sometimes limited success. It is really challenging. So I think housing has always been a challenge, but this year it's just exponentially increased, and it's been really hard.
And DJ, for you, with your position with the with YCD, are you seeing housing also as being the top concern?
Yeah, absolutely, Priya. And I do definitely wanted to start off by just really thanking Maria Sue, Dr. Sue, for being here today. One of the things that I have said and will continue to say publicly, as we've gone through COVID and we've seen communities like Bayview Hunters Point where challenges were just overly exacerbated, you know, Dr. Sue and DCYF and her team, they stepped up. They stepped up to the challenge. And it's great that we have individuals here in the city and county of San Francisco that are in positions like Dr. Sue, who are willing to fight for our communities and for our young people, and we'll continue to support her in the effort that DCYF has. But Priya, you know, what we really saw, especially during housing as an organization, as Gabriella was talking about, we actually are providing housing assistance relief for individual families here in Bayview Hunters Point. And we're really looked at those individuals that are 50% below the average median income, which we know here in San Francisco is just extremely high. So really focus on those folks who are housed in public housing through Hope SF sites and assisting those folks, you know, outside of the moratorium with being able to pay their back rent, which we know safety and just being able to live is like an essential need. As an organization, what we faced during COVID-19 was looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it was that first rung of food security, of housing, of education was what was most impacted during this period of time. But you know, to date we've been able to help well over 400 families stay in their homes, and actually help them and assist them with forward rent, and then being able to educate them so that they don't fall back into these sorts of situations, you know, for the future. So, you know, holistically, what we did is we took an approach working with our city partners and our community-based organizations and really designed this holistic ecosystem that would wrap around a family so we can help with education. We were still assisting individuals with going out and finding employment opportunities and working alongside, you know, Friends of the Children as well, too, who is a part of our Black to the Future initiative as one of its partners.
DJ, thank you for sharing that with us. I want to turn now to Frederique. You're the Director of Programs for Friends of the Children, and I'm curious what you all saw as the biggest challenge over the past year and how the organization stepped up to meet that challenge.
Thank you, Priya. I feel, first of all, honored and blessed to have such wonderful partners at basically helping us combat what I would say is you know, a lifetime experience for all of us. But specifically, the pandemic has forced an already under-resourced neighborhood isolated from jobs, isolated from food, isolated from the rest of opportunities. And more importantly, the communities that, the families that are enrolled in our program, they were specifically selected based on challenges and barriers that they face, circumstances or trauma. Now, with the pandemic, they have been forced back into those very environments because of school closures. For our families, schools serve for many reasons, a place of safety. It's a place of access to a daily meal. It's a place for folks to have positive peer relations. It is a place where they are in an ecosystem where they are supported. The strategy of the city has been to basically provide these community schools, wraparound services, and now that was closed to them. And it's been devastating. I think my people alluded to the housing scenario, the situations. We've leveraged Black to the Future to do rental assistance, the evictions, and the social isolation. It's been brutal.
We've talked a lot about the issues surrounding housing and the needs of families over this past year. Let's turn specifically to something that Maria brought up first, which is the academic challenges over this past year. There was certainly strong evidence of the digital divide that is such a problem throughout the state and certainly here in the Bay Area as well. Maria, could you talk about the achievement gap, particularly in terms of education over this past year?
Yes, and the achievement gap is really hard to talk about, primarily because when we think about achievement, we think about there's a baseline and how much more you go over that baseline. We know that a lot of our children, particularly living in Bayview, particularly our African American, Latino, and Pacific Islanders, were already not at that baseline. So when we talk about the achievement gap that these children experienced this past year, you're only capturing a portion of the real story, because we really need to think about what the compounded learning loss that they've experienced throughout their entire educational life. So it was really, really crucial for us at the city to, number one, recognize that, and then number two, say that it's not just digital divide or access to digital devices. It was really about access to someone who can help guide that young person through the digital curriculum, as well as help that young person persist and stay on task. Because we knew that those were some of the issues that a lot of our young people were experiencing. And so that's why our department created the Community Hubs initiative, so that we could create in-person supports for young people who have historically been marginalized from our education system, or who are experiencing significant difficulties in participating in the online curriculum that our public schools, the school district, was providing. And what we saw was that having young people inside a safe environment that, of course, followed COVID mitigation procedures, not only helped them to catch up on their education, but it also helped them on their social emotional well-being. We saw that children started to open up, started to have fun and joy again. And when you have fun and joy in a space, you also then have open an opportunity to learn. And honestly, I feel like this is where our nonprofit agencies really, really thrive. And this is the magic, where you have nonprofit agencies that have caring adults like Federic and DJ, who are providing that just safe emotional supports for our children and their families, which then opens them up for learning and for really just thriving. And I think that's the beauty of what we're seeing that's happening with Friends of the Children, and the partnership that they have with all of our other service providers in the city. I will also say that learning loss is not just specific to academics. Learning loss is also very, very closely connected to social and mental health. And so it's really, particularly for children, we need to ensure that the conversation balances both components. It's not just one or the other. It has to really be one and the same breath.
And Gabrielle, you were seeing this in a very up close and personal way. Could you maybe share with us a story, a thought about this past year, particularly in terms of academics and learning loss?
Yeah, I mean, much of what we've seen has been really in line with what Dr. Sue was mentioning. What we've seen happen this year has not only intensified the challenges and resiliencies that we already saw present for our families, and as EJ mentioned earlier about thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's really what we've seen this year, right? When families are not housed, when they don't have enough to eat, it's incredibly challenging to engage in remote learning. It's very challenging for many families, even with those things, to engage in remote learning if any of you have kids at home. Just like for us, right? The more stable and resourced our home life is, the more productive and engaged we're able to be in our work life. And additionally, what has happened this year, on top of the academic achievement and engagement, is many of our families have been really hit hard by COVID at home too, right? We know that families of color have been disproportionately impacted by COVID, and we've had many families lose loved ones during this time. And so what we've seen is this gap between more and less resourced families and students. It's just deepened and intensified. And what we have seen is the students who have been able to emerge the most unscathed are the ones that we've been able to align really closely with our CBO partners, the ones that we've been able to get into learning hubs, the ones who have organizations like Friends of the Children partnering really closely. Our CBO partners and the city have just been vital in mitigating the impacts of COVID and school closure and social isolation. I really can't imagine being at Hillcrest or doing my job in the past year without the partnerships that we have previously had, but this year have just deepened on such an intense level. And we've really, now that we are back in person and students, many students are back at our site 5 days a week, we are seeing that even when we look at their academics, right? We're really seeing the impact of that CBO and city engagement and that support net throughout that is paying off.
Frederic, could you tell us more specifically about the work that Friends of the Children has done over this past year to help reduce that gap?
Yes, I just wanted to quantify some regarding this learning loss. All our kids come into our program at least one grade level below. And we try to narrow that gap. When COVID hit, out of our 93 kids, now there are average, they're 2 grade levels below. Of 93 kids, we only have 4 kids that are reading at grade level. I mean, that's insane. We have one kid who is currently homeless. He was 1.5 grades below level. And now he's at pre-A, which is kindergarten. And it's the mental health piece as well, the trauma, the instability being caused by not being in the classroom around supportive adults, by not being basically supported in a caring way. It's not just learning your ABCs. It's the hustle and the struggle. And it's been a real challenge. And most of our kids are in community hubs, as well as experiencing severe housing insecurity. And so can I also add that this is going to take a village to do this effort. These inequities existed before. Now they're just exacerbated like the Red Sea. And it's going to require a concerted effort between city agencies, nonprofits, together. And I know the Board of Supervisors has there's a working group which Dr. Sue is on, called RISE, where they realize that this is a long-term, one summer program will not solve this. This is a generational lift that we have to do.
And DJ, could you speak to that as well? What do you see as being needed to be done moving forward in order to improve equality here in these really tough situations?
Yeah, and then that's a really loaded question too, Priya, right? When we sit down and we look at the inequalities that we've seen, and to Frederic's point, it's just been exacerbated But I can share as an organization with the majority of the folks that are here on this panel, we've kind of transitioned from an organization that was just focused on workforce development and, as you kind of stated, education, and took it a step further and say, how do we as an organization actually bring folks from generational poverty to generational wealth? And that takes education, it takes housing, it takes public safety, it takes transportation. And so we really are, again, holistically looking at all of these angles and how it all works together in order to move, like Frederic was saying, when we brought up just the inequities around education, I mean, we just look at the school system across the nation and our test scores as it compares to other countries and other nations. We know that we're historically and statistically towards the bottom. And, one of the things that I can say, as we know everything that has been negative, I'll share, some positive stories that we have had where families and young people have actually increased their grade levels because we found that some of our young people don't excel sitting in a classroom. And so being able to have schoolwork that they can do for an entire 6 weeks and get it done in a week works for some of these young people. And then I also think with some of our families, it gave a little bit more empowerment to our families and to the parents. We had some parents that would go to work, drop the child off at school, that are now at home with them and being able to read. So we had some success with individuals teaching their kids what we call financial justice. They're talking to their children about real estate property. People are at home talking about cryptocurrency and talking about stocks and bonds because you're interfacing so much and so often.
Gabrielle, we've talked about the academic gap, and I'd like to ask you about a related issue. So, as the social worker at Hillcrest Elementary School, have you seen a change in your students' behavior and emotional state over the past year? How often were you able to be in touch with them? And what do you think your school and other organizations need to do in order to support these children's social and emotional needs during this time?
It's been really intense. I've been at Hillcrest going on 9 years, so I'm pretty familiar with the school community at this point. And the mental health needs that we've seen this year have been heartbreaking and really varied as well. It's really difficult. As I mentioned earlier, it's difficult to pull apart basic needs from mental health needs when we're talking about kind of the level that many of our families are working under in this last year. It's really difficult for anyone to maintain stable mental health when they're spending every night in a hotel and wondering when their next meal would come from, right? Not to mention when you add on complex trauma exposure or community violence or any of the other challenges that many of our families face on a daily, nightly basis. About 85% of our students live under the poverty line in San Francisco, and 40% are homeless. So it's a large percentage of our school population. And unfortunately, Friends of the Children has not been able to provide a mentor for every single one of my students yet. I'm waiting for the day. But additionally, for many of our students, school was one of the only stable and safe places that they knew. Not for many of them, that was not the case, but for many of them, that was the case. So having that school structure shut down so unexpectedly for all of us, and then experiencing really high levels of social isolation has been really difficult. We have seen increased rates of suicidal ideation, which, we've seen nationwide, not just at our school, immense levels of parental stress. And some students, a handful, it's been difficult to even locate them. There's been a lot of families who've had to move out of the city because they've had housing struggles. So it's been really hard. I really believe that in order to effectively close academic gaps and support families' mental health, the district, the city, and our amazing and vibrant nonprofits have to work together in total partnership, right? These are all of our babies, and we all bring different strengths to the table. Our school, Hillcrest, is a community school. And that means that what we believe at our school is that we need to provide everything a family needs in order to flourish at our school site. And we might not have all of those things, but we at least need to be able to provide a conduit and a connection to where a family can get those things in order for their students to thrive and to flourish and for their mental health to really flourish. And Friends of the Children has been really vital in stepping up to provide that connection between the school and the family and being an extra positive adult role model. The list goes on. And this kind of intense relationship building has been really effective. And we've seen it be really beneficial for students' mental health. And it's been a rare resource to find. You know, I'm a therapist, I'm a clinician, but I strongly believe the thing that's going to create the most positive mental health outcomes at this point is developing more partnerships between the city, between nonprofit partners, and between the school district when we think about reopening and we think about how to hold our students and our families the best. Because talking about mental health without talking about all of these other things is really, I feel like it's putting the horse before the cart. It's just, we can't talk about one of these things alone.
Let's turn to another novel action by the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. Frederic, last week, the Board of Supervisors announced that it will be forming an African American Reparations Advisory Committee. And this is to explore possible financial compensation and other recommendations for the descendants of enslaved people. What more can you tell us about the committee and what you imagine might be the result of that committee's work?
So I sit on the educational committee within the Mega Black Initiative, and one of the challenges is that you are in schools and there's nobody that looks like you. So I would love to see money put in to hire African American teachers. I would love to see reparations put in so people can own a home, put money down for a down payment. I would love to see barriers lowered so you can get an SBA loan. I mean, the list can go on and on. When I moved here, it was 13%, the city was 13% African American. That was in 1995. Now it's barely 5%. And we support schools where there's 95% African Americans. So that gives you a sense of the siloed neighborhoods that are under-resourced that we're talking about. This is going on throughout the United States, but specifically in San Francisco, it is a challenge because my son, when he walks through a neighborhood, they associate him with the nearest public housing development. And that's just unacceptable. And so the reparations community is trying to redress a lot of the policies within the city. African Americans are the first fired, last hired. They are the most in the city. They are the most number on probation. The Human Rights Committee has a lot of information. Matt Haney has made a request for nonprofit parity and pay because the nonprofit sector are the ones who employ most of African Americans. And so why is it that the pay scale is so different than a city worker? So it's just, there's a long historical impact, and it can't be changed overnight, but I love what, I agree with it. I mean, our leader, the mayor, it's bold and it's audacious, and it needs to occur.
DJ, anything you'd like to add?
Priya, it's about time. That's what I'll add. I think when, it was interesting, I was having this conversation over the weekend and we were just talking about, reparations, and we were talking about the history of slavery and folks in 40 mules and an acre. And I'd say nowadays in 2021, you just give folks 5 acres and some actual money and resources. I think we can do some real things. But, I think as folks have said, I mean, just big kudos to the bold and audaciousness of our leadership here. So that body is a 15-person body. So I was really instrumental in working with the folks at Mega Black SF to really talk to them about the process of what it takes to be on a committee or a commission or on an advisory board, because it's a part of the system. So having to go through the Rules Committee and the Board of Supervisors, we were having some of those discussions. And I really love the formation of the board, or the advisory board as well too, Priya. There are very specific seats that are on this commission that are going to be looking at what reparations is, should, and needs to be. Folks, I think some of the qualifications for one seat is you had to be previously homeless. Another seat is you had to be involved with the justice system. One is you need to be a part of a community-based organization. One is you need to live in public housing. So it's a body that has the voice of those that have been most impacted, which I think is the most rich part of this advisory board that's going to dictate and lead what the legislation and everything looks like and what it needs to be for folks. But really, I just say, Priya, at the end of the day, it is about time.
You know, Michael, what DJ just said, he's so right. It's about time that a city as rich as San Francisco pays more attention to supporting the residents of communities like Bayview Hunters Point. And that's why we're all here tonight. We'll get back to our panel in a few minutes, and they'll answer a few of the questions posed by our audience. But first, we'd like to tell you about another aspect of the pivot we've made at Friends of the Children in response to the COVID crisis.
You know, our whole model is built on one-on-one mentoring in person. But last spring, the pandemic suddenly made in-person meetings impossible. So we had to work hard to figure out alternative approaches. The big breakthrough came when we convinced our partner schools to allow our mentors to log in to their children's virtual classrooms. That meant that each of our mentors could now do virtually what they used to do in person: sit beside a child whenever they wished in the Zoom classroom, and then utilize the Zoom breakout room after class to meet one-on-one with their child. We're one of the very few nonprofits that's been authorized to do that, and it was a game changer for us and for our kids. Now we've got a short video to show you how that virtual mentoring is working.
When I learned that Friends of the Children was coming to the Bay Area, I applied immediately, and I got to be one of the first mentors here. People that are very motivated to help youth in the communities that they live in are really drawn to this organization.
Hearing that, Alex was going to be hanging around, it really struck me as like, oh, someone is really tapping into the idea that human capital is really like our strongest form of capital.
Before the pandemic, what it was like was I was set up with youth, and we would work 2 hours inside of the classroom. And then after school, I would pick them up either directly from an after-school program or directly from the school, and we'd go out on another 2-hour outing, to work on the youth spark and to build their growth mindset.
The pivot has been definitely challenging. It was very, very difficult to connect to the new forms of technology.
Mr. Proctor was one of the teachers that from the get-go was like, hey, when are the mentors getting in the classroom? These kids are really excited to talk to their mentors and to see their mentors.
It became very obvious to myself and my fourth grade teacher that we need to have time for fun for the students on Zoom, playing games, scavenger hunts, or whatever it might be.
Yep, excellent. Right now is a really tough time for kids to get the support that the school is kind of required to give them with student support teams and individual education plans for the kids, because how can you really implement that? Myself and other mentors have been able to adapt and be flexible and do different drop-offs for the kids at their homes, like either care packages or produce drop-offs on the weekends, and also just little check-ins with the families. We have shifted from being really just youth-oriented to being more family-oriented and working with the caregivers in another capacity, which didn't exist before.
The kids and the mentors are just happy to see each other, and it's a much more sort of natural relationship and feeling that I see happening between mentor and mentee.
I see a lot of potential in all these kids, and it is just so great to think about where they were 4 years ago and to see where they are now, just being just like gems in their community.
That was so inspirational. I am so proud of the pivot that Alex and the rest of our professional mentors have made during the past year. We have a strategic plan that calls for us to add a new class of kindergartners each year, and our goal is to serve 500 Bayview children ultimately in the future. We can be certain that the needs of those children will continue to change as our organization grows, and I'm confident that our staff will continue to evolve to meet those changes.
That is so true, Avi. Every spring when we add a new class of kindergartners, we also need to hire another group of professional mentors. And we're committed to paying those professional mentors a healthy living wage, both because it's the right thing to do and because retaining them is key to our model. We invest a lot in each child because we know they're worth it. And that's where you come in. We receive very little government funding. In fact, over 95% of our revenue this year will come from private donors like you. We cannot do this work without your help. So please, partner with us to help the children in our program break the generational cycle of poverty. Once again, there's 2 ways to donate. You can click on the donate button in the top right corner of your screen, or you can send a text message to 71777 with a message that says FRIENDS, that's FR, the number 1, ENDS, $ and the amount of your donation and your name. And remember, every dollar you donate tonight and for the rest of our fundraising campaign until we reach 1.5 million will yield $2 of support for our children. Thank you. And now let's get back to Priya and our panelists.
We do have some questions from the audience, and I'm going to start with this one from Kareem. He says, I'm a professional mentor at Friends of the Children. Several of the children in our program have had a father or other close relative killed by the time they're in elementary school, and it's been incredibly traumatic for them. What are your organizations doing to reduce street violence in the Bayview?
There's been a lot of efforts for the city in the past. There was the Community Response Network. And I really think that it needs to be a wraparound effort. When our friends go out in the community, we step over these white lines and you see them. And our kids see the actual shootings. And then the question is, how do you get them services? The services are not, the mental health services across the agencies, they don't talk to each other. Dr. Sue is only one entity, right? There's Human Service Agency. There's a whole bunch of other networks within the landscape, but they don't talk to each other. It's fractured and broken. And the street violence, to be able to address it, yes, at the scene of the crime, but then the secondary trauma is real, and it doesn't heal, and then it circles itself, and it doesn't heal. It is not right that we have families that have witnessed 3-4 murders in 1 year, and they have lost loved ones by like 5 siblings, each of them losing a father. That does not make sense.
I want to turn now to a question for Gabrielle from Mariella. She says, I have a 5-year-old son, and I know he needs all the adult support he can get, but I'd be reluctant to trust a complete stranger to provide that support. Could you tell us about the Friends of the Children program and how you get to that point of trusting the people who are working with children?
Well, I'm also the mother of a 5-year-old son, and I completely understand the hesitancy to trust a stranger at first. I mean, I'm a social worker, so I'm pretty suspect. And, you know, I think that it's really natural and a good thing that you want to take it slow, right? And I think that I would say that when working with any new adult in your child's life, I'd really advise you to get to know their program, ask questions about the hiring and screening process, which I know about at Friends of the Children is very rigorous, and spend time with the mentor and the child together. You know, talk to Frederique, really start to understand the organization. Additionally, you know, if you were a parent at my school, I probably would talk about my relationship with Friends of the Children, because we have been in relationship for, gosh, how many, 5 years now? I think we're going on. And I feel really comfortable. It's an organization that I feel really comfortable vouching for. I really believe in it. I've seen positivity come out of their work time and time again. So if for parents who come to my school and I'm having this conversation with them, because it can be really scary for parents, I would additionally kind of share the relational trust that I have with the organization, that I have with Frederique, that we have with the mentors, you know, and that we invite them into our classrooms every single day. And we've really built incredibly deep relationships with them. And really, they've built incredibly deep relationships with the families that we work with. And they've often provided that bridge between the school and the family, which has been incredibly healing and just a really beautiful experience.
And we've got one more question from William for Frederique. William says, "This is my first exposure to Friends of the Children, and I'm so impressed by the work your organization is doing. But when I listen to all of you talk about how the huge barriers these kids face are often getting bigger, I wonder, can your professional mentors really make a long-term difference in the lives of children who face so many challenges?"
So, Friends of the Children is not just the Kumbaya program. A hug can only go a certain length. For us, the program model was founded on research. Everybody knows that research has shown that a long-term caring adult will positively impact the child. And so if we were to define ourselves by a zip code only, then all I can say, that means that structural racism is alive and well. And the language, the barriers are just, it's not, what I can say is that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. That's why it's 12 and a half years. All the barriers that you hear us talking today, it's taking one step at a time to get to the mountain. And that's our goal. And if you're saying that we cannot do that, then what is hope? What is the effort to even do so? We should not be defined by where we were born.
DJ, you are a member of the board of Friends of the Children. What's unique about the program? What's unique about what they offer?
Well, the most unique thing that comes to mind for me, because I'm putting on my executive director hat as well too, is that all of the funding that comes to Friends of the Children is actually hand-to-hand donations. So I think that's huge. That's one. I think two, the model that we have of working with kids intentionally so young is so key. You don't find that elsewhere. When you can tell an individual, we are going to be with you from K through 12. First, most folks would just say, okay, hold on a second. That's a bit much. That's a bit audacious. But we know, catching young people in 3rd and 4th grade starts to speak to that prison to pipeline. So, I know I'm going on and on, but I just think it's so instrumental to be able to be, my big word for 19 and 20 and 21 has just been intentionality. So to have a person that's intentional in their lives with so many barriers that we spoke about before, I think is huge. And it's really what separates Friends of the Children apart from so many other programs and organizations that are out there.
Thank you so much, all of you. And we are going to have to wrap up this amazing conversation. I know there's a lot that we have gotten into, a lot more that could be said, but we really appreciate the depth and the range and the experience that you all have brought. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. Thank you for the hope that you are bringing to all of us through what you do each day.
DJ made a really keen observation. Our commitment to stay with each child from K through 12 is a bit audacious, but we know that's exactly what it takes. As Frederic said, supporting children who face immense barriers is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
That's so true, Abby. And before we send you off to dinner, we have one more short video that will show you an example of how our professional mentors have adapted to the changing circumstances of the last year, expanding their focus beyond the individual child to address the needs of their entire family during the pandemic. Please meet Alessandra, her mother Rosa, and her mentor, Tanya.
For me as a single parent, it feels like sometimes I need help. I try to do my best effort to be the best I can. Alessandra is a really smart little girl, but she thinks like an adult. She wants to be a ballet dancer. She wants to be the first lady president. I'm doing myself something good and productive every day so she can learn from that. Love you. I was working a night shift and I was always tired and I didn't have time to take my daughter to the park and stuff. So when I heard about Friends of the Children, it was a good blessing because it made me feel happy, like Alessandra wouldn't be lonely most of the time. When I first met Tanya, Alessandra and her already had a connection really fast.
She was quite shy when I first met her, but now she is just, wherever she goes, it feels like the sun is just shining.
I think she learns more things when she's around Miss Tanya because she sees things from another point of view.
My favorite thing about Miss Tanya is that she's a lot of fun and she's the best mentor to me. She helps me by sounding out the sounds with me. And sometimes we go to the ice cream shop and we get to have ice cream and we get to go to the park. That made my life happier and we had lots of fun. Realized.
Communication with Rosa was always great. When COVID hit, I was able to identify when something wasn't really quite right.
I got laid off and they said it was gonna be temporary, but they took off our medical insurance and we were coping with what was going on, but at the same time, it was kind of scary. I was losing a lot of hope.
She was in the process of filing for unemployment benefits, but I can tell the frustration in her voice, and I immediately went online. I got her the exact form, and I let her know if she had any trouble with the questions to give me a call.
Tanya always called Alessandra, make sure she had school supplies, she was doing good.
She comes to my house with some food, and sometimes she just brings some presents.
That made me feel so happy because it made me feel like somebody cared, you know. I just got a new job recently. I'm in an office, on my own office, and it's funny because I always wished to do that, but I always thought in my head, I'm not ever gonna be able to do that. It's like a dream come true to this point.
Hi.
Hi, Alessandra. Alessandra is a wonderful, bright, intelligent young girl. She puts love into everything that she does.
She wants to do a lot of things. She's so kind. I feel like she might be like a mentor one day too. She'll follow Miss Tanya lead. I know that I want her to do whatever makes her happy. And if she has support, I know she will get far. I feel like it's very lighter weight now that I know that she has somebody there for so many years ahead to come.
I would like to thank Tanya and all of our professional mentors for the incredible work they're doing during the pandemic and always. And thank you to Priya and all of our panelists for a sobering look at the challenges faced by the children and families in the Bayview and the inspiring work you're doing to help them meet those challenges. I hope that you, our guests, learned a lot from the discussion. Thanks to each of you who donated tonight, we have moved closer to our $1.5 million campaign goal. And remember, our challenge grant will continue until we reach that goal, so every dollar donated for the duration of our campaign will be doubled.
Abby, you know, for a lot of us, it's starting to feel like we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, look at us. We're here without masks on today,
That's
less
right.
than 6 feet apart. But I think what we've heard tonight is there are challenges that go way beyond masks, way beyond the pandemic, and those problems in communities like Bayview Hunters Point are going to last for a very long time. And that's one more reason why we commit to stay with every child for 12 and a half years, no matter what. Thank you all for joining us on that journey.
Good night, everyone.